I was thinking about the 8 teams that are left. Yeah. Only 2 teams, the Giants and the Jags, really nobody thought would be where they are today.
Sure.
The other 6 teams, I would make an argument that everybody preseason thought that they would be where they are. And you take a look at the other 6 teams, obviously the Chiefs, the Eagles, the Bengals, the Bills, and then the Cowboys and 49ers. You know, this was almost kind of like chalk at the beginning of the year. I always like to look back and think like what the predictions were, who outkicked their predictions, and things of that nature. And certainly the Jaguars and the Giants are at the top of that list. There's no question about that. And maybe more so the Giants because of the unknown with the new coach and all that other stuff. The Jaguars spent almost $170 million, the most ever by an NFL team in free agency this offseason, and brought in a new coach and is still paying an old coaching staff. So Shad Khan, the owner down there, spent a lot of money. So the 6 out of the 8 teams, I think we all would probably say we expected to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I think is good and not good about the NFL is they try to create so much parity, which they have done. But when really push comes to shove, the teams that you expected to get there are in the mix. But you've got 2 teams that, you know, one's got a much better shot than the other, in my opinion, and that's the Giants getting to the NFC Championship game as opposed to the Jaguars. That's going to be a very tough test for them. But if one of those 2 teams ended up winning this weekend and getting into the championship game, that now becomes one of those great underdog stories. It is a great story right now, but we have seen these stories end in the divisional round. The Giants are one of those franchises where it doesn't, though. The Giants have 2 examples of where the story keeps going and going and going, and that's where Giants fans' minds are this morning, that it's not going to stop here. Why would it stop here? Yes, the Eagles have had a good year, but it's not like they are unbeatable. And quite frankly, the way that the draw ended up and the Eagles getting that number 1 seed might be the best thing for the Giants with the way that the 49ers are playing, because I don't want to see them at all if I don't have to.
Let's see if the Dallas defense can stop them on offense. And let's see if Dak Prescott, who's coming off one of his best games of his career at the biggest moment in his career, because there's a lot of pressure on that young man going into these playoffs, see if they can deal with the 49ers. I will say this for the New York Giants. When you think where they were 2 weeks ago, and we started to talk about the potential matchup of them going back to Minnesota, one reoccurring theme around that thought was the fact that they knew that they could hang with Minnesota in Minnesota because they had just done it.
Yeah.
And they had gotten beaten by a 61-yard field goal. Now, I'll also say the same thing potentially here for the New York Giants, because a couple of weeks ago they were in Philadelphia. They didn't play Saquon Barkley. They didn't play Daniel Jones. You know, they didn't play a bunch of other players that were significant contributors for them, both on offense and defense. And they hung with the Eagles. They made it tough on the Eagles to finally win the game. And certainly Jalen Hurts coming back from injury and the way that he played the game, he wasn't all that sharp. I would think that that confidence that you had going into Minnesota, you now have that confidence going down the Turnpike. And you feel like you can go in there and you can beat this team. It's really hard for a team to beat another team 3 times within a division. It's been done, but it's hard to do it.
Yeah, and this is a completely different matchup and challenge for the Giants defense going against Jalen Hurts, because one of the most immobile quarterbacks in football, even though I thought he had a great year, is Kirk Cousins. He does not move around. He does not run. He does not break the pocket. And we're talking about Jalen Hurts, a guy who did it just about as good as anybody this NFL season when he was healthy. So this is a different challenge for Wink Martindale. But I mean, I think the confidence really comes from, you know, the Giants fan confidence doesn't just come from the history of what the organization has done with different players, but also these coaches. I mean, Brian Daboll and Wink Martindale, it's like, you know, I know Brian Daboll's a first-year head coach, but he's been through so much. And Wink Martindale has been a guy who has, you know, playoff experience just all over his resume.
NFL lifers, man.
Exactly. So, I mean, that to me, and not that the Eagles don't have a great staff, and Nick Sirianni, I mean, there's something to be said about a guy who had that much pressure on him to get this team to where they are right now and actually succeeding. I mean, there is something to be said about that with the roster that they have. But, I mean, these guys and what they've squeezed out of this team, I mean, that's where I think the confidence comes from.
Watching back at the tape, man, Andrew Thomas is a hell of a player.
Yeah.
Holy God. He's like their answer to Lane Johnson in Philadelphia.
Sure.
Now, Lane Johnson's playing with a sports hernia, and it's not easy. And they need him. And, he didn't play, and he needed the rest. And it really is basically about pain management and tolerance for Lane Johnson, one of the best offensive linemen in football. I think he made the All-Pro team. So he's a guy to watch closely. And, if he's unable to go, that is a big, big loss for them. And watching the way that Thomas and Neal have played here late in the season, they've done a really good job. They have turned out to be bookend tackles, which is exactly what you want. And Thomas is just like taking the next level. He's taking it to another level. I mean, we've talked here for years and years and years about the offensive line of the New York Giants.
Yes.
I mean, to the point where I think Al was just basically going to quit. He almost quit. I almost sent him on a 6-month sabbatical.
Yeah.
He said, I can't talk about the offensive line anymore. Well, Al, it's actually completely flipped now. The story and the narrative around them is that they are playing exceptional football. And it helps when your quarterback is playing the way he's playing.
Right.
So Joe Burrow last year went into the playoffs. Everybody was talking about how bad the offensive line was. This offseason, they rebuild that offensive line, and it really was coming into its own. Now it's missing 3/5 of their starters. But the quarterback can still manage. The quarterback can still get rid of the football. The quarterback's going to get hit a little bit more, for sure, but he can still get rid of the football, and he's got good wide receivers to make those plays. Daniel Jones, a little bit differently. They can ask him to run with the ball. He can take off and run with the ball, but the way that he is throwing the ball now and the decisions and the accuracy that he's throwing with takes an enormous amount of pressure off of this offensive line that now is actually growing to be good. It's no longer a liability for the Giants. Now it is an asset.
Sure. And you've got the 2 tackles on offense, and then you've got that defensive line, which is a huge strength for them, especially with the 2 defensive tackles when you're talking about Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence and what they have done. And I know Ojulari has been hurt a lot, and he's hurt again. But you add the development and what Kayvon Thibodeau has brought to this team. I mean, that's where you win games. I mean, obviously the quarterback, we put a whole nother level, and Daniel Jones all the credit.
He's why they are where they are.
Right.
You say whatever you want. I mean, there's a lot of good things that are going on here, and a lot of Dave Gettleman guys that are a big part of this moving forward and being successful. And Brian Daboll's the one that's got to unlock all that stuff, and he's got to trust in his defensive coordinator. And I think they've really made a good pair to this point. But the one thing about the New York Giants now that I think that Giant fans could take heat on from the 12 team and the 7 team is the fact these guys are competitive now. They step on the field, they are competitive. And some of them are playing for their futures.
Oh, of course.
Which is like the greatest thing that you could ever ask for. You want players out there fighting for their meal ticket. And, a couple of those guys
more
are doing
of them
that.
than not.
I know.
I mean, on this roster, if you think about it, I mean, the 2 biggest names are also playing for contracts, and Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley, and each victory and each great playoff game adds to that. You got a lot of younger players on there who are trying to make an impact. Kayvon Thibodeau said himself that these playoffs give him another opportunity to get paid. You think about a guy like Isaiah Hodgins, who was bouncing around off the scrap heap and is now looking like a number 1 wide receiver in the league. And then maybe, he starts building up that resume enough where he gets a big payday. You can go all around this team. I mean, there are some guys with contracts, but there's more guys without.
It's too bad they couldn't have kept James Bradbury, who they will see on the other side of the field this week. But again, that was part of Joe Shane's manipulation of the salary cap and trying to figure out, what it looks like moving forward. These are the decisions that, the business guy, the cap guy, those guys sit down and they try to figure out and map a future. And depending on what they're going to have to pay Daniel Jones, they may have to lop off a few other guys. And they still may end up having to play with some of these guys that don't have the big contracts. But you could say that about every sport. Every sport you could say that about, with the exception of maybe the Mets. That guy will pay anybody anything. It doesn't matter.
As long as he doesn't have a plate in his ankle.
Right, exactly. I just think, like, if you're the Giants, you have a huge amount of confidence right now getting ready to go into Philadelphia. Confidence is it's a fleeting thing, but when you got it and you feel like you can do it, now all of a sudden you become dangerous. And that's where I think this game for the Philadelphia Eagles, and remember last year's divisional matchup games, how crazy they were?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I'm telling you, every single one of these games has the potential to be the same way that last year's not super wild card, but divisional weekend was.
Yeah, I mean, the Jaguars, as great as they've been to me, because I had the Jaguars to win the division bet.
Oh, that's right. By the way, how much did you win?
Cashing, it was like $550 something, somewhere around there.
Nice.
Yeah, $50 and plus 1,100, whatever that ended up being. But yeah, it was pretty good. But they've been good to me. But I think, the Chiefs are probably going to take care of business.
The Chiefs are going to score over 30 points. You know that,
right? So
the Bills are going to score somewhere around 30 points.
That game right there, man, I couldn't even tell you how that game's going to go. The Bills and the Bengals, that's one I wouldn't put a dime on because there's so many different ways that game can go. It's going to be close.
I just think it's going to be, the Monday night game that got canceled. That first quarter, first couple series that the Bengals had, the offensive line did a really good job holding back the four-man rush of the Bills. If you go back and you look at the tape, you'll see it. And then all of a sudden now two more of those guys are missing.
Yeah.
So there's a clear and distinct advantage going into this game for the Buffalo defensive line, even without Von Miller.
Now, if you are the Bills, do you use the Damar Hamlin card this week, or do you save it for a potential championship game? Meaning that
the only way you're playing the championship game at home is if the Jaguars upset the Chiefs, then you would have the home game. If the Jaguars lose to the Chiefs and you win, then they got to go. You got to go to the neutral site.
Right.
That would be a neutral site AFC championship game between the Bills and the Chiefs down in Atlanta. I don't know if that means anything. I kind of have a sneaking suspicion that he'll be there this week.
Week, because it's a guaranteed home game.
I wouldn't be surprised. He could come out. It could be like an amazing moment, and you could have two teams at the middle of the field at the same time at pregame. I don't think the Bills would do that. I think they would they're trying to win the game. Like, this is where you use every inch of advantage you have to try to win a football game. And I would think that he's going to show up and that place is going to be incredibly, incredibly loud. And it's already been emotional in the last two home games.
Oh, man, it's going to be like this unbelievable scene there in Buffalo.
If he shows up. Now, I know that they said last week that he was continuing his recovery, and it was not the right idea to have him at that game. And emotionally for him, especially dealing with a heart issue, I'm sure he's going to be all fired up. Lungs.
Right. So maybe they keep him at home. But if they trotted him out somehow in this game, and he's healthy and looking great, and then all of a sudden, all the players come off the field, and they're all in the middle of the field, and they're standing there, and then Damar Hamlin puts on his uniform.
Oh, come on.
And goes out and ends up playing in the game. Just imagine that. Give him his helmet, coach. I think he's ready. You sure, Damar? Yeah, I'm sure, coach.
It's a bird, you moron.
Let's do it. And then on the first drive, Joe Burrow drops back. He's looking around. He can't find anybody open. He throws the ball up. And who's there to catch it? Damar Hamlin. It's an interception. And then he's running it back in slow motion as Bills fans are crying, all of them collectively sobbing as he runs into the end zone, drops the ball and looks up to the sky. Thank you, God. Thank you. And the Buffalo Bills go on to win.
Well, he goes on and gets
30-0 because of his number 3.
Well, he goes on and gets 2 more interceptions, has 3 interceptions.
Oh, he has 3 interceptions.
3 interceptions.
Right.
Yes.
That'd be even better. So the game is very close. It's 33-30. And then all of a sudden,
Eddie, don't you play that, Jerry, you know what? Don't play that. Don't you play that.
Damar Hamlin in the fourth quarter, already with 2 interceptions. There he is. And they're going, Damar, 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 Damar. Joe Burrow. You hear like when the linemen hit each other. There's Joe Burrow. The rush is coming. He steps up. He gets hit. The ball's up in the air. It's a wobbling duck. And then out of the sky comes Damar Hamlin, actually from above. And he scoops up the ball and then levitates down the field into the end zone. That's going to be just the greatest moment in NFL history.
That would be amazing.
Damar Hamlin. Damar Hamlin. That's what we want, NFL. For all the people that say the NFL is fixed, this is how you fix it this weekend. This is how you fix it. Not only will DeMar Hamlin go out there for the coin toss, he will put on the uniform and have 3 interceptions and send the Bills to a neutral site.
Oh, man.
AFC Championship game. All right, that's very good.
Hey, Al, didn't you have a sports hernia?
No,
I did.
Oh, you had a sports hernia?
Well, yeah, they called it a sports hernia.
Yeah, even though you don't play
athletic.
sports, you're not a sports guy. I mean, you probably hurt yourself, going to the bathroom or slipping on your tile or something. But it is a sports hernia, which is what Lane Johnson is dealing with. How painful and how restricting was that for you?
For me, not much because I don't really do anything.
Right, yeah.
So it really just looked weird.
What Boomer is doing here, do you realize what Boomer's doing? He's doing what the callers do. When an athlete has a particular injury and we're talking about that injury and the caller calls up and goes, yeah, I had a sprained MCL a couple years ago. I'm 55 now. And, I was, walking around. I do have a very active job. And for me, it limited me for sure in getting what I wanted to do. Now, it healed on its own, didn't have to have surgery. But, for sure, I understand what Lamar Jackson's going through. Because for me, it was definitely limiting. So now you're comparing Lane Johnson to Al Dukes with the sports hernia.
Yeah,
how
I have
limiting,
a sore throat and my balls hurt.
Like how limiting was the sports hernia for Al
at the same time?
I mean,
sometimes.
Really?
Well, just
That's
that
the
whole
thing.
area felt weird.
Right, but any restrictions?
No. I was still able to scroll through Twitter and Instagram. Sagging balls.
oh, God. All right, it is Boomer and Gio on the Fan and CBS Sports Network.
Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the red bell so you're notified when we have new content.